How's it going, everybody? Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports here, and today I'm going to walk you through installing a set of these new Alpharex Nova Series headlights for your 2021 or 2022 F-150. But before we dive into the install, there's two important things to note. Firstly, at this point in time, these headlights will only work on factory halogen trucks. So if your truck came from factory with an LED headlight from Ford, then this is not going to work for you, unfortunately. But if you do have a more bare bones halogen headlight, then this will be a great swap that'll get you some LED functionality and obviously a much better look. Now, the other thing that's worth noting is that there's quite a few steps involved in this install, and it may look a little daunting at first because you do have to remove the grille, but I can assure you guys that it's actually not as bad as it looks. Even though there are quite a few steps in between, everything is pretty simple, and you can actually do this whole install with hand tools in your driveway, and this is definitely something worth tackling if you're a weekend warrior or a DIYer. You can knock this out at home, no problem. So I just wanted to put that out before we get into it, but let's start tearing things apart and we'll show you how to get the factory housings out. All right, so the first order of business is we need to remove the two screws in each wheel well here holding this plastic valance. So if you grab a little ratchet and a 7mm socket, you can back these out no problem, and then we'll just pull the whole valance off. It's all plastic clips across the front of the truck, so it's pretty simple from there, and then we'll move on. All right, so now we need to remove all the plastic clips along this shroud that kind of covers the top of the grille and a little bit of the radiator. We'll pull that out of the way, and then there's going to be 4 screws underneath, and those just need to be backed out with a 10mm socket. So let's get to it. There's one last hidden one back here behind your inlet for the intake, so just make sure you don't forget this guy. Okay, let's speed this up a bit. At this point, it's not a bad idea to disconnect the ground terminal on your battery, since obviously we're going to be working with electronics a little bit here. But the next thing we need to do is remove these 2 little plugs for this harness that feeds into your grille shutters. So we're just going to push on the tab and wiggle that first one free. And then this one's a little more tucked in there, but there's a tan tab down towards the base of the clip. Push on that. Now we got both off there. And then we just need to disconnect this little Christmas tree clip that holds the harness to the grille. That way these don't get caught and snag on the grille when we pull it out. Moving down to the bottom of your grille and both the left and right corners, there's going to be little bolts on each side holding it in place. All you need to do is grab that ratchet from earlier with an extension and an 8mm socket. We're going to back these out, and then we can pull the whole grille off the truck. The rest of it's just held on with some little plastic clips that push into place, so once you yank it free, it should pop out, and then we can focus in more on the lights themselves. Now, as you go to remove this grille, you're going to need to basically grab it from kind of inside the mesh down here, and then one part at the top of the frame. We want to pop it out. That way the clips come free from the light, and then we're going to get the rest of the clips free, put some pressure on this side, and then you kind of have to just wiggle and fight with it to get it to come out. There's not really a nice way to just easily slide it out of place, but you do want to be mindful of this rubber trim along the bottom because it does like to catch on this, and that'll hang up and make you fight harder than you need to. So with that being said, let's work this thing out of here. For the next couple steps, you're going to want to obviously duplicate what you do on one side on the other side as well, but we're on the passenger side of the truck, and we're going to remove these 2 little bolts here with a 10mm socket, and there's also a hidden guy back in here behind this little plastic bracket. You want to back that out with a 10mm as well, and then once that's clear, we can move ahead. There we go. Moving to the front of the headlight at the bottom corner, we're going to remove this little bolt with an 8mm socket. All right, guys, we're really close to having the headlight out of here. We just got to remove this little plastic Christmas tree clip, and then we're going to use a 10mm socket to back these two bolts out from the top of the housing. All right, we are at the final step for removing these factory housings. Basically, you just don't want to wiggle it too much side to side. We don't want to bust the tabs in the back. You want to pull it out as straightforward as you can away from the truck. Once you have it clear, then we can get in there. We'll pop the little connectors off the back for the wiring. Then we can set this aside and we'll finally be able to get our hands on the Alpharex lights and start getting all of that pieced together. All right, folks, we've got the factory headlights out. I went ahead and pulled the driver's side out off camera, so everything's clear. But before we put the new Alpharex headlights in, I want to make a note that they're mostly plug and play, and we are going to reuse the factory harness that's already in the truck, but you're going to have a separate small harness that's included in the kit, and that's what's going to power the DRLs. So you do need to run the wiring for that. Now, I've already ran the wiring off camera, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the layout, so that way you can essentially mimic that layout in your own truck. So starting things off, if you come up by the battery here, it's a little bit dark, but down in between the battery box and the radiator fan shroud, I've got the module mounted up. That's just this little plastic box, and I just zip tied it in place for now, but it gives it a snug place to hold where it's not in the way. Then the wires that follow out of that to your fuse for the DRLs come right to here, so I mounted the fuse off of this tab on the battery box. Then from there, your power and your ground leads are going to come around the back, and obviously we've got the ground tied in back here. I ran the power to this side, and we'll disconnect this again before we mess with more of the wiring, but I wanted to have it in place to show you guys. So with those kind of zip tied and tucked down, it's nice and clean on that side. Then you're gonna have a third wire, which is a small gray signal wire that comes from here as well. I brought that down around the bottom of the box and around towards the fuse box. And you can kind of see where it tucks in through this little slot. Now, once you get it through here, it's worth taking an X-Acto knife, box cutter, kind of notch a little bit of the plastic out. That way this wire has somewhere to settle in and it's not going to get pinched by the cover. Then once you've done that, you can kind of see where the wire needs to run. I snaked it through the fuses, and it's got to get to this little 10 amp fuse right there. Once you have it tied in, that's where you're going to get the signal that tells the truck to turn the DRLs on when you start it and you're driving. But that little wire isn't too tricky. They give you a pretty good amount of slack. So like I said, just down and around the back, and it'll meet up with the control module. So that covers the first section of the harness. For the second part of this wiring, we're going to come back to the little control module that I showed you guys before on the side of the battery. And the two leads coming out of the back of that, it's two red wires. They're going to fish underneath this support into the headlight compartment, and one is much shorter than the other. That's this little red guy right here. This is going to stay on the passenger side. He's going to plug into that new headlight when we put it in. Then the other longer lead I brought around kind of over the top of this windshield wiper washer container and behind the neck, up and through, and then there's a wiring harness here that traces along the grille. And it seems like a pretty good place to zip tie this in. You just chase with some of the wiring that's already there. So popped a couple zip ties on it, it runs along. Once it meets the little contraption here, don't know why I don't know what this is called, the hood latch lever. Once it meets that, you can go underneath it, tie it in to the cable on the other side. And like I said, just added a few more zip ties just to keep it up and tidy. Then I brought that around, and there's a little hole behind the plastic support here. You're gonna tuck that down, and that allows you to bring it behind this support and into the headlight compartment. And as you can see, it's just the right amount of wiring to have the plug right at the end. So that way I can tie it in with the rest of our harness. And that pretty much does it. Now we are finally ready to install the new Alpharex lights. So I like to put a little rag down right here just to help protect the lens. That way it's not getting scuffed up while we tie in the wiring. And then really all you have to do is kind of match the connectors to the equivalent size connectors on the back of the light. There's really not a whole lot of confusion here. So we'll take the largest connector, butt it up, You just want to make sure you get a nice click so that way you know everything's seated and making a good connection. Then we'll take kind of the medium-sized connector, bring it up here. Got a nice click. And then this last little one just pops right up in the corner on that gray fitting. And then the last thing we got to do is grab that red wire from earlier. And this is actually going to plug into the white wire on the back of the housing. And all you have to do is just slide it over, click it in place, and then make sure that that little plastic shroud is over the top to help protect it, make it a little bit more weather sealed. And from there, we're good to go on the wiring. With all of our wiring tied in, everything behind the light is good to go. So now we just need to line up this little post with the hole in the fender. You want to make sure you get this tab threaded down and over the little stud at the bottom. And then obviously the two tabs at the top need to line up with the holes on the support. So it just takes a little bit of wiggling, but it's not too tricky overall. There we go. With a firm press, we've got that post seated. Now we can work our way back through reinstalling all the factory hardware that we used when we took the factory housing out. And from here, it should be smooth sailing. Real quick, before you continue on with the install, right now is a good time to check and make sure that your lights work. So reconnect your battery, flick the switch in the cab, make sure that you've got high beams, low beams, blinkers, all that good stuff. And if everything's functional, then we can continue on, get the grill mounted up and wrap up this install. But if you're having any problems, right now is a lot better time to find out that there's an issue than after you've already rebuilt the whole front of the truck. So if you do have a problem, just pop a couple bolts out, tip that housing forward, make sure your connectors are tight and that your wiring looks good. You can kind of troubleshoot from there. But as you can see, everything's looking stout on our truck, so I'm gonna move along and get that grill put back in place. All right, folks, that's a wrap on this install. And as you saw, it really isn't too difficult. It's a bit time consuming, but it can definitely be done at home with hand tools. So hopefully this is kind of a helpful guide if you are planning to tackle a headlight install like this at your house. But with all that being said, the overall look is fantastic, and I would say that the juice was well worth the squeeze for this one. Obviously, our headlights were the factory halogens, but we had swapped LED bulbs in there, so it wasn't quite as dramatic of a change in terms of color temperature, but the light output is a lot better and a lot more controlled in these because the LED chips are baked into projectors, and it's got a very nice sharp cutoff in the beam pattern. So a better look overall just in terms of the projection, but in terms of the styling, it's also a big upgrade, and I think it kind of makes makes the truck look a little more upscale as well. And this could be pretty helpful for those of you that are also running fairly base level F-150s. On top of that, we've got the big C-bar DRL on the outside, and this has that signature Alpharex startup feature where when you unlock the truck or open the door, it'll kind of cycle through the whole DRL and flash amber and all that good stuff, which is just kind of a fun party piece. And on top of that, you've got sequential turn signals now. So I think that the whole package is well worth it if you're looking for a good upgrade to just replace your entire factory halogen unit with something a lot more modern. Now, if you do want to pick up a set of these headlights for your truck, I'll have some links down in the description below. Go ahead and click those and they'll shoot you over to our website so you can take a look at these. And as always, thank you guys for watching, especially if you stuck this one out to the end, and I'll see you guys next time.